Hey guys, tonight we travel to a place where the sun blazes high, the earth cracks with thirst, and yet, somehow, there's ice. You're wandering through the dry stretches of ancient Persia, where the desert wind kicks up little spirals of sand and your feet crunch over sun-bleached gravel. The heat is constant, the kind that sticks to your skin like a second robe. And yet, in the middle of this arid world, someone offers you a chilled dessert. Not lukewarm, not kind of cool if you squint, but actually wonderfully cold. You're not dreaming. You're just about to learn how a civilization figured out refrigeration without a single plug socket. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing that hits you isn't the heat, it's how calmly everyone seems to ignore it. You're in an ancient Persian village, maybe around the 5th century BCE. The Achaemenid Empire is in full swing. Great kings with even greater beards are expanding borders, building palaces, and taxing merchants. But you're not with royalty tonight. You're walking the dusty main street of a small desert town, trying not to melt into a puddle. The buildings are made of mud brick, the same pale brown as the sand beneath your sandals. You pass a baker's stall, and even at this hour, the oven glows faintly. The smell of flatbread mixes with the sharper scent of dust and sun-warmed herbs. A camel snoozes under a tattered awning, flicking flies from its ears with the laziest effort imaginable. If reincarnation is real, that camel definitely requested the slowest life possible. Children dart past you barefoot, shouting something about dates and honey, while their mothers sweep the thresholds with brooms made from date palm fronds. And all the while, above you, the sky is a bleached bowl, so bright you can't quite find the horizon. You're already sweating just from existing. Which makes it even more baffling when you spot a man stepping out of a small clay-walled home, holding what looks suspiciously like a chilled cup. He lifts it to his lips, sighs in relief, and glances at you with a grin like it's the most normal thing in the world. Here's the strange truth. For thousands of years, long before anyone had thought of plugging in a fridge, the Persians were chilling everything from water to desserts in the middle of the desert. You'll get there. But for now, all you know is that you're parched, and this whole ancient refrigeration thing is suddenly a matter of personal survival. You trudge along the edge of the village toward the outskirts, where the mud brick gives way to more open space. The further you go, the more the sounds of daily bustle fade, fewer footsteps, fewer donkeys braying, more wind and the occasional creak of something wooden settling in the heat. Then you see it, rising gently from the earth like a giant clay beehive, smooth-sided and curved, pale and quiet. It doesn't look like much. Honestly, if no one told you otherwise, you might think it was a granary or a particularly artistic termite mound. But this is the Yakshal. Literally, ice pit. A structure designed not to resist the desert heat, but to work with it. It stores ice. Yes, actual ice. Historians still argue whether the earliest versions of these domes were developed in one region or independently across several, but what's certain is that by 400 BCE, Persia had already perfected the technique. It wasn't just about storing cold, it was about crafting it. You walk slowly around the structure. It's built from a special mix of clay, ash, egg whites, lime, and goat hair. The result? A material known as sarouj, which is surprisingly waterproof and acts like an insulator. Basically, ancient Persian Tupperware, but in architectural form. The entrance is small, a single dark doorway low to the ground. You crouch, duck your head, and step inside. The air changes immediately. Gone is the hot breeze. Instead, a still, hushed coolness wraps around you. It's not frigid, but after the desert sun, it might as well be a blizzard. Your eyes adjust slowly. The space inside is surprisingly spacious, vaulted and echoing slightly. The floor dips down toward a deep pit, carved from packed earth, where chunks of ice once gleamed under flickering oil lamps. Right now, it's mostly dark, save for a crack of light from above and the faintest smell of old straw and mineral dust. Here's a fun fringe detail you wouldn't expect. Some yakshals were designed with little niches along the inside walls, not for decoration, but to hold offerings, charms, or herbs thought to protect the stored ice. Magic meets engineering. You run a hand along the cool inner wall. Smooth, silent. If air conditioning units had a spiritual ancestor, this dome is it. And here's the kicker, they weren't rare. Dozens, maybe hundreds, of yakshals dotted the Persian landscape, each one serving a town, a noble estate, or a caravanserai. They weren't just for the elite. They were communal, practical, and astonishingly effective. Of course, the one you're standing in isn't working right now. There's no ice, no sweet dessert waiting for you in a chilled tray. But the architecture hasn't forgotten. And neither have the people. Outside, a boy passes with a bucket of water sloshing lazily at his side. He glances at the yakshal, shrugs, and keeps walking. To him, it's just part of the background, a thing his grandfather might have told stories about. To you though, it's a miracle in mud brick. You leave the cool hush of the yakshal and step back into the sunlight like someone peeling themselves from a cold bath into a furnace. The shift is instant. Your skin prickles, your robes cling, and that bucket of water the boy was carrying suddenly feels like a lost opportunity. But you're not done. Because now that you've seen how the Persians stored ice, you're probably wondering, where did the ice even come from? And here's the slightly absurd part. It wasn't just lying around. You squint toward the north. Far, far off in the distance, well beyond your walking range unless you're in the mood for a 3-day uphill trek, you can just make out the shimmer of the Zagros Mountains. Snow still caps the tallest ridges, even in summer. That's where the magic begins. At night, when temperatures dropped sharply, especially during winter, teams of workers would channel water into shallow pools dug into the desert floor. These were specially designed to maximize surface area while minimizing sun exposure. Picture a wide dish made of clay or packed earth, rimmed to hold the flow just so. Water would slowly freeze overnight, thanks to the intense cold and dry desert air. This wasn't some side effect. It was deliberate ice farming. Historians still argue whether these freezing pools, or sabbats, were used throughout the empire or only in select regions. Some claim they're mythologized in Persian poetry more than in practical use. Others swear by archaeological remains. But here's what most agree on. By dawn, sheets of ice formed, which workers would crack and carry, by hand, mule, or sometimes in slatted wagons, to the yakshal. That's when the Real logistics kicked in. You can practically hear the creak of the wooden carts and the grunt of tired men unloading heavy slabs of ice into the dome. Each block had to be stacked with layers of straw or sawdust in between, natural insulation that helped it last for months. Imagine trying to pack snow into a warehouse in January and expecting it to still be usable by August. Yet somehow this worked. You stroll past a nearby grove where tall cypress trees break the skyline, and you catch a glimpse of an older man sitting cross-legged on a worn rug. He's grinding something in a shallow stone bowl, maybe saffron, maybe rose petals. He sees you staring and waves you over with the kind of slow smile only someone with endless patience can pull off. He's making faluda, a frozen noodle dessert soaked in syrup, lime, and rosewater. It's sticky, sweet, tangy, and it must be stored cold to be palatable. You accept a small bowl. Somehow it's chilled. Not cold like modern ice cream, but refreshing enough to jolt your brain from sleep mode to, did that really just happen? You take a bite and nearly weep. It's equal parts soft and chewy, floral and sugary. And it turns out Persians weren't just refrigerating, they were inventing desserts that demanded refrigeration. The word ice cream doesn't exist yet, and won't for a couple thousand years. But here you are, spooning up a semi-frozen treat beneath the pomegranate trees of a desert courtyard, all thanks to a logistical chain that began on a freezing mountain ridge and ended in a mud brick dome. Your host gestures toward a large ceramic urn nearby. Inside, chilled water, gently perfumed with basil and mint. The clay vessel sweats, the moisture evaporating off its outer surface, creating a cooling effect. It's low-tech genius. And again, something you'd probably scroll past in a modern kitchen hack thread, except these folks figured it out over 2 millennia ago. Here's a fringe fact that might surprise you. In some Persian homes, people even had small household yakshals, miniature versions, or underground cellars designed to store perishables. These weren't the dome giants, but rather cleverly placed basements or shaded pits lined with straw and clay. Practical refrigeration, built right into the domestic flow. Now let's talk airflow. Because it wasn't just about ice. It was about controlling temperature like desert-born HVAC technicians. The yakshals were often paired with badgers, wind catchers. Tall chimney-like towers that funneled cool air downward and expelled warm air upward. That's right, passive cooling through pressure differentials. You're standing in what is essentially the prototype of green architecture. You make your way up a ridge and find one of these wind catchers looming like a forgotten lighthouse. Sand has gathered in its corners, and birds flit in and out of its openings, but the structure is intact. A narrow stone staircase winds inside, and if you dare to climb it, you can hear the wind whistling through slats above, pulling air downward with a soft hiss. Stand close to the shaft's edge and you'll feel it, a stream of cool air brushing your cheeks like the breath of the mountains themselves. Here's where it gets even more impressive. The best engineers knew exactly how to position these towers depending on the regional winds, adjusting their vents like organ pipes. Add in the reflective coating on many yakshals, white plaster, designed to repel sunlight, and you've got yourself a full ecosystem of climate control built entirely from mud, wind, and a ridiculous amount of trial and error. Of course, all of this served a deeper purpose than just staying cool. In an empire that stretched across mountains, deserts, and river plains, food preservation was survival. Cooling wasn't a luxury, it was infrastructure. Ice and chilled goods became a symbol of control over nature, a flex of engineering so casual you almost miss it. You head back down into the village, carrying your empty bowl of faluda, the taste of lime still clinging to your teeth. Along the way, a boy leads a donkey piled high with herbs, baskets, and what looks suspiciously like a ceramic flask clinking with chilled liquid. He nods at you and whistles an old tune, maybe a work song, maybe just a summer chant. And as the wind kicks up a faint breeze from the north, rustling the tall palms, you realize this isn't a history of deserts and thirst. It's a story of how people, thousands of years ago, looked at the heat and decided they didn't have to suffer through it. They didn't have electricity, but they had patience. Geometry. Nice. You continue through the sun-baked town, weaving between adobe walls still warm from the previous day. Your sandals crunch over gravel as you follow the scent of honey and roasted barley. Someone's baking bread in a domed clay oven just ahead. But you're not here for food. Not yet. You're here to follow the trail of the Yakshal's influence beyond desserts and cooling. Because when you scratch the surface of any technology, especially ancient Persian technology, it always turns out to be tangled with politics, poetry, and the everyday boredom of running an empire. Let's start with a camel. Not just any camel, a royal caravan camel. One of the shaggy, majestic, and profoundly unimpressed beasts trained to carry precious cargo across the burning salt flats and endless dunes of the empire. And sometimes what these camels carried wasn't silk, or spices, or scrolls, but ice. Wrapped in layers of felt, buried in straw, loaded into sealed containers, and hauled from one end of the empire to the other for feasts, festivals, or even medicinal use. This wasn't done daily, it was a high-cost, low-yield operation. But it happened, especially when the king decided he wanted his melon chilled in July. Historians still debate whether these long-distance ice runs were symbolic flexes or genuinely functional supply lines. Was it about status? Showing off that you could command the mountains to serve you even in the lowlands? Or was there real infrastructure behind it? Regular stops, Yakshal outposts, even toll roads for icy cargo? You stroll past a sun-faded mural on one of the walls, chipped but still vivid. It shows a procession, musicians, dancers, guards, and at the center, a nobleman holding a goblet that steams faintly in the heat, ice wine, maybe, or chilled rosewater. Someone cared enough to paint it. That means it mattered. And beneath the pomp, you catch the everyday rhythm again. The sound of ceramic jars clinking. The rattle of wheels. Women hauling water from a shaded cistern while toddlers splash their feet in the runoff. All of it resting on the invisible scaffolding of ice storage and air cooling. Because once the technology existed, people found ways to make it useful. Not just for luxury, but for medicine, food safety, and even funerals. Yes, funerals. Imagine you're the family of a noble who has just passed away during a scorching summer. The body needs to be preserved until the full rites can be performed, family summoned, astrologers consulted, the stars double-checked for optimal burial timing. What do? You call for the Yakshal. Down in those cool domes, wrapped in linen and surrounded by snow or salted ice, the deceased could rest for days in calm dignity. The Yakshal became a bridge between the living and the dead, quiet, sacred, and slightly chilly. That might be why some villages kept their Yakshal close to both the bazaar and the cemetery. A place for life's most mundane and most profound moments to intersect. Ice for dessert. Ice for grief. You veer off the dusty path and enter a shaded arcade, a series of stone arches forming a cool passage. Along one wall, a seller fans herself lazily behind a display of crushed herbs and powders. Basil, fenugreek, dried rose petals, and something that smells suspiciously like wild thyme. She lifts a brow and offers you a small paper-wrapped bundle. For the heat, she mutters and smiles. You tuck it into your sash, not sure what to do with it yet. But her stall reminds you, medicine was a major user of refrigeration even in the old world. Persian physicians recorded recipes for ointments that spoiled in heat, treatments that needed to be stored in clay jars buried in the ground or kept near yakshals. And sometimes, cooling itself was the cure. Fevers were treated with cold compresses or snow held against the neck. Sarais? Fainting spells? A breeze funneled from a badger, the wind catcher. There's even a fringe text, little known outside of Persian medical circles, that suggests powdered ice mixed with dried mint and vinegar was used to reduce swelling. Probably wouldn't pass modern safety regulations, but hey, they were trying. You reach the edge of a small garden, date palms, figs, and bitter oranges, but what catches your eye is the irrigation system. Thin channels snake between the beds, feeding each plant precisely. These canets, underground water tunnels, worked in tandem with Yakshal systems. Not just to grow food, but to keep entire towns alive through blistering summers. And here's the kicker. The engineers who built these tunnels, carved through rock and packed with gravel to prevent collapse, were sometimes the same folks who designed Yakshals. It was a full-service package. Water and ice. Life and luxury. You kneel beside one of the open channels. The water's not cold, but it's cooler than you expected. Cool enough to drink, if you're bold. You cup a handful to your lips. It tastes like stone and roots, like something that traveled a very long way to find you. And as you rise, brushing your damp hands on your robes, you start to get it. Ancient Persia wasn't just good at building things. They were good at building systems. Whole interlocking frameworks of architecture, nature, and ritual, all bent toward making life just a little more bearable in the most hostile climates on Earth. That's what the Yakshal stands for. Not just a refrigerator in the sand, but a quiet declaration. We don't have to surrender to heat, or death, or the randomness of weather. We can adapt. We can plan. We can carve snow out of sky. You make your way toward a raised platform overlooking the town. A boy runs past, laughing, holding a chunk of dirty ice aloft like it's a royal jewel. Someone shouts at him, half annoyed, half laughing. You can still hear the donkey bell jingling in the distance. And as the sun begins to slip lower in the sky, washing the earth in burnt gold, you realize there's something deeply comforting about knowing that even here, miles from modernity, centuries from convenience, people made coolness possible. Not with magic, but with mud, and a stubborn sense of possibility. You rest for a moment on the edge of that raised platform, letting the warm air sweep past you in slow, lazy gusts. Below, the rooftops of the town seem to melt into the desert, the occasional domed Yakshal poking up like pale, half-buried moons. But now you're drawn not to the ice, but to the wind. Because if ancient Persia was a master of keeping things cold, it was also a genius at using the invisible air itself to bend the climate just enough to survive. Enter the badger or wind catcher. You've seen a few already, rising like tall chimneys above the buildings, square towers with slits on every side, just wide enough to swallow the wind, tame it, and send it cascading downward into the house below. You walk now toward one of these, feeling a subtle drop in temperature as you pass into its shadow. Inside, it's deliciously quiet. The walls are thick mud brick, but it's the airflow that cools you. The wind enters the tower from whichever direction it's blowing, no wrong side, just options, and glides downward, guided by clever channels, often into underground storage rooms or courtyard pools. The air doesn't blast like an electric fan, it breathes. And sometimes, if there's no wind to catch, well, the badger would still help pull out warm air rising inside the home. It was a passive system. No gears, no levers, just physics and patience. Historians still argue whether the Persians invented the badger first, or merely perfected it after hearing of similar designs in Egypt or Mesopotamia. What's certain is that they turned it into an art form. Some badgers even had internal waterfalls. Yes, you heard that right, trickling streams that cooled the incoming air through evaporation before it ever touched a sleeping face. You step into the base of one of these homes, now half ruined but still serviceable. The floor is smooth, cool stone. A clay jar sits near the wall, beaded with condensation, someone still using this place. The jar is full of rose water, its scent faint but floral. You imagine someone coming in here during the hottest hour of the day, dipping a cloth in that jar, pressing it to their forehead, and simply waiting for the heat to pass. This was climate control. Not as we know it, with humming vents and blinking thermostats, but a slow, silent strategy of making peace with the heat. And it wasn't just for people. In some larger estates, the wind catcher system was integrated into food storage. Dates, pickled lemons, dried yogurt balls, all of it kept in cool chambers designed not just to preserve, but to comfort. There's even evidence of entire banquet halls engineered to stay cool, where the Shah's guests could dine in what felt like a spring breeze, despite it being midsummer outside. You exit the building and continue on, the stone steps warm underfoot. Your path curves toward a small neighborhood where poorer homes cluster closer together, their walls patched with straw and plaster. And here's the twist. Even these homes had versions of the wind catcher. Maybe smaller, maybe less elaborate, but they were there. That's what's striking. This wasn't a technology locked behind palace gates. Like the yakshul, the badger seeped into daily life. It became part of the skyline. Children were born beneath its cool breath, old women napped in its shade, scribes composed poems in its draft. Speaking of scribes, one of the more charming records we have of the badger doesn't come from an engineer, but from a poet. A certain Jalal the Tired, writing in the 10th century, complained that his ink dried too fast in the summer heat, until his landlord installed a wind catcher. "Now my metaphors run like honey," he wrote, "and the flies have given up." You smile at that. You can almost hear his voice, grumbling as he dips his reed pen, fanning himself with a scrap of paper while muttering about stubborn similes. You round a corner and find yourself back at another yakshul, this one older, its dome chipped and patchy, the ventilation shafts along the side overgrown with dry grass. Still, there's a kind of reverence to it. Someone's left a little woven fan at its base, a token of thanks maybe, or nostalgia. And just beyond it, a wind catcher. Tall, narrow, cracked at the top, but still whispering faintly when the breeze turns just right. You wonder if the two structures were ever linked. Ice and air, cold and current, an ancient Persian symphony of stillness. You sit again, this time beside a lazy dog who doesn't even bother to look up. The shade here is richer somehow, the heat less biting. And you begin to notice something. How the placement of every building, every street, even the color of the clay, is part of the cooling strategy. Lighter walls reflect sun. Narrow lanes trap shade. Courtyards catch breezes and bounce them softly between rooms. This wasn't ad hoc. This was design. Modern urban planners could still take notes. You close your eyes just for a moment. The hum of distant voices. The wind sifting sand through broken shutters. Somewhere nearby, the creak of a pulley as someone draws water from a well. And beneath it all, that quiet triumph of architecture over climate. A whisper of wind, coaxed into being useful, cooling not just palaces, but poems. Not just desserts, but daily life. You stand and stretch your legs, brushing a bit of sand from your sleeves. The wind has softened again, like it, too, is taking a nap after passing through so many corridors. As you follow a winding lane downhill, the houses begin to spread out, less clustered now, more room for gardens and storage. You're heading toward a different kind of structure. Not domes. Not towers, but something older, more primal, cannons. It's not the most glamorous word, admittedly. Sounds a bit like a stubborn donkey might. But the ingenuity behind the Persian cannet system is what made all this possible in the first place. Ice storage, wind towers, agriculture, cities. Without cannets, ancient Iran would have been all sand and no sorbet. So, what is a cannet, you ask? Imagine this. You're standing above what looks like a series of small, evenly spaced holes stretching in a line across the desert. They resemble a mole's idea of a landing strip. But beneath them? A miracle. Deep underground, cool water flows gently from a distant mountain aquifer through a tunnel carved entirely by hand, sometimes stretching for miles. The holes above? Those are air shafts, both for ventilation and for hauling out the tons of soil removed during construction. Picture workers in linen head wraps, lanterns in hand, inching forward beneath the earth, tapping their tools against limestone, calculating the slope down to the inch. One wrong angle and the water stagnates. Too steep and it floods. But get it right, and most did, and you've got a steady, silent, evaporating free delivery of water across hundreds of kilometers. Historians still argue whether Persia borrowed the concept from earlier Babylonian channels, or if it emerged independently in the highlands of modern-day Iran. Either way, by the first millennium BCE, the Achaemenid Empire had turned it into an empire-wide infrastructure marvel. You find one of the ancient shafts now, ringed with stones and partially covered by a grating. Peering in, you hear it, just barely, the whisper of flowing water far below. Cool air rises from it, faint but unmistakable. You place your hand near the opening. It's like the earth is breathing. Some cannets led directly to private homes, others to communal pools, mosques, or gardens. In Yazd, still today, some traditional homes have a basement room built right along a cannet channel, where families once sat during the summer afternoons sipping sour cherry syrup and discussing neighborhood gossip. Imagine being that relaxed. Today, you'd be lucky if your building has working AC and a non-leaky fridge. And here's a quirky tidbit for you. Some cannets came with their own folklore. One tunnel near Kerman was said to be guarded by a jinn who hated loud laughter. Locals would tiptoe past certain wells in respectful silence, as if the earth itself needed a nap. You stroll past the next shaft, noticing now how vegetation clusters around them. Tamarisk trees, wild mint, even a sleepy fig tree or two. Life follows water, even if it runs silent beneath your feet. Eventually, the cannet ends at a small orchard. A few goats bleat in the distance, and the trees are heavy with pomegranates, their skins cracked just enough to show the glittering seeds inside. A shallow basin has been dug here, fed by the underground channel, and the surface of the water shimmers in the dappled shade. You crouch down and dip your fingers into the basin. It's cold, mountain cold. Water that began its journey days ago through solid stone, arriving here with not a single horse, pulley, or pump involved. And it gets better. In some towns, cannets were integrated directly into the ice-making process. During winter, water from the cannet would be funneled into shallow, shaded pools where it froze overnight. The ice was then broken up, carted to the yakshal, and stored. Think of it as a kind of natural refrigeration supply chain, with zero carbon emissions, if you're keeping track. More impressively, this entire system worked autonomously. No electricity, no fuel, no engine noise. Just gravity, stone, and time. You lean back against a sun-warmed wall and take a breath. The world around you hums softly, bees buzzing around the fig blossoms, a donkey braying far off, and that subtle hush of water beneath the soil. It's easy to forget, with all this heat and dryness, that this was once a land of green ambition. Not just survival, but comfort, cultivation, even a little luxury. In fact, one Persian king, Artaxerxes, if memory serves, offered tax breaks to anyone who built a new cannon. That's how crucial water was. Forget gold. Forget silk. In the desert, water is the currency of civilization. You rise and walk the path beside the orchard, the cannon humming beneath your steps like an ancient, buried stream of time itself. The wind picks up again, brushing the tips of the pomegranate branches. A few seeds fall to the earth, bursting like rubies in the dust. You wonder if as you wander further into this oasis of cool shadows and soft earth, you feel a shift in the rhythm of the place. It's more than just the steady hum of water underfoot or the gentle sway of trees in the breeze. There's something almost secretive in the air now, an intangible shift between the mundane and the mystical. You follow a narrow stone path, each step cushioned by the soft desert dust. The ground is slightly damp here, as if the cannon's tendrils have spread out like roots, feeding more than just the orchard. Eventually, the path opens up into a courtyard, one of those rare moments in the Persian desert where the promise of water has created something lush. In the center of this courtyard is an ancient Chahar Bagh, a Persian fourfold garden. It's a design that dates back to the Achaemenid Empire, though you might recognize it in more modern forms across the Middle East or even Europe. The garden is split into 4 quadrants, each divided by thin, babbling channels of water that trace the same delicate arc as the cannons. It's a space of stillness, of thought. At first glance, this seems like the kind of garden where you'd expect a long-sleeved scholar to sit, staring off into space, his fingers drumming gently against the stone edge of a fountain. But look closer and you'll see a different world altogether. The Chahar Bagh was not just a tranquil retreat for the elite. It was also a meticulously designed microcosm of the universe. The 4 parts symbolize the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. The water channels, which may seem like mere decoration at first, represent rivers. There's the river of life, of course, but also the river of paradise, the one the ancient Persians believed was watered by the sweat of the heavens themselves. The central pool is more than a decorative pond. It's a little reflection of the larger cosmos, water not just to cool, but to connect the garden to the universe beyond. Some early Persian thinkers believed that, through this design, the garden could serve as a metaphor for the divine order. Each tree, each shrub, placed in relation to the water, was a quiet whisper of divine symmetry. You sit by one of the pools now, your fingers brushing the surface of the water. You imagine the grand houses of old, with Persian nobles sitting in their Chahar Baghs, drinking sherbet from frosty silver goblets and writing intricate poetry in their journals. The pool before you glimmers in the low afternoon light, its surface occasionally disturbed by the ripple of a passing bird. This wasn't just a garden, it was an experience. It had layers of purpose. The coolness of the water, the pleasant shade of the trees, the space to move freely, to escape the intensity of the heat. It was more than a home garden. It was a space for reflection, intellectual exchange, and peace. Historians still argue about whether these gardens were purely functional, primarily for relaxation and agriculture, or if they were imbued with a deeper, almost spiritual significance. Maybe both. Maybe they served as a place to meditate, a kind of calm temple to the gods who offered the precious life-giving water. You notice a figure in the distance, a woman walking slowly along one of the paths between the trees, a long scarf fluttering behind her in the soft breeze. She doesn't seem hurried, just at peace with her surroundings. You watch her pause beside a blossoming rose bush, reaching out with delicate fingers to touch a flower. The air is sweet with fragrance. And just like that, it occurs to you. The Chahar Bagh wasn't about bringing the outside world in, it was about making the world outside seem smaller. This carefully controlled space, like the Kanat system, was a way to find a sense of balance and order in the midst of the unpredictable chaos of nature. You lean back against the stone edge of the garden, your eyes tracing the path where the water flows, slow and steady. The rhythmic sound of it seems to blur the lines between what's real and what's imagined. You think about the care that went into these gardens, the irrigation, the plants, the timing of water flow, the layout of paths, and you realize that nothing in this environment was accidental. Everything had a purpose, down to the last stone in the path, the last flower in bloom. There's a peacefulness to it, a quiet understanding that here, nature and civilization are in harmony. You get the sense that this is what the Persians were after all along. A little bit of peace, carved from the desert with water, stone, and careful hands. You stand up, brushing the dust from your knees, and make your way toward the garden's exit. A pair of brightly colored birds dart across the path, and you pause to let them pass, their wings flashing like stained glass. It's a reminder of the careful dance of this place. Water, earth, and life. As you leave the Chahar Bagh behind, you step into the warmth of the afternoon once more. The air feels different now. Not quite so dry. There's a lightness to it, as if the land itself has exhaled. You think about how, just a few steps away, the desert stretches on endlessly. But here, in this tiny corner of the world, the Persian garden has created something sacred, something with purpose. And for a moment, you can almost understand the appeal of this age-old design. A small reflection of paradise right under the sun-soaked sky. You take a deep breath as the warmth of the sun hits your skin again. The garden is behind you now, and the long expanse of the desert stretches ahead, unbroken and infinite. Still, you feel something shifting in the air, as if the weight of the moment has followed you out of the Chahar Bagh. The shift is subtle, but undeniable. It's like a sense of understanding has taken root inside you. As you walk further, you pass a series of stone walls, weathered by time but still standing strong. These aren't just any walls. They are the remnants of an ancient Persian fortress, once a strategic stronghold in an empire that spanned continents. And as you approach, the true scale of it becomes apparent. The walls rise, not with the arrogance of power, but with the quiet pride of enduring craftsmanship. The fortress you find yourself standing at the base of is called Ranghuz, a name that may not ring any bells for most. It wasn't one of the great Persian capitals like Persepolis or Susa. Still, Ranghuz played an important role in the defense of the empire. These walls were built to withstand the harshest of conditions, sandstorms, sieges, and the long, slow decay of time itself. You lean against the cool stone, eyes scanning the horizon. It's hard to imagine this place alive with soldiers and traders, merchants arriving with spices from India, soldiers sharpening their blades for an impending skirmish. Yet in its heyday, Ranghuz was a bustling nexus of culture, military prowess, and trade. The trade routes that passed through it formed part of the vast Silk Roads, the ancient highways that linked the East with the West, and Persia was right at the center of it all. Historians still argue about the specifics of how these trade networks began, but one thing is certain: the Persian Empire was at the heart of it. Their control over the fertile lands of the Middle East, their strategic positioning along the trade routes, and their willingness to promote a culture of tolerance and trade made the empire a global crossroads. But trade, as you've already seen, wasn't just about silk or spices. Persian merchants also traded in knowledge. From the precision of Persian astronomy to the techniques of ancient medicine, the empire was known for its intellectual pursuits. Ranghuz, with its strategic location and steady stream of goods, became a meeting point for minds of all kinds, scholars from India, philosophers from Greece, and scientists from Egypt. Imagine standing in the bustling markets here centuries ago, surrounded by traders arguing about the price of saffron while an astronomer in the corner debates the size of the Earth with a mathematician from Alexandria. You walk through the gate of the fortress, the echo of your footsteps merging with the soft whistling of the wind. There's a sense of mystery here, as if the walls are guarding more than just the land. The secrets of ancient Persia seem to swirl in the dust, their shadows lingering just out of sight. But there's something else about Ranghuz that draws you in, its quiet, deep-seated sense of resilience. The walls, though eroded and cracked, are still standing tall. They were built with an eye for practicality and endurance, made of local stone that could withstand the weight of centuries. The ingenuity behind these fortifications is subtle but impressive. Each stone is carefully placed, a testament to the skills of the workers who carved them out of the surrounding hills. Looking up at the walls, you can almost imagine the ancient engineers, their hands steady and sure as they set each block into place. They had a saying in Persia, one that you might have heard whispered on the wind: "Strength is not in the size of the stone, but in the way it fits into the whole." You climb to a small observation tower, where the view stretches out across the desert, and for a moment, everything falls quiet. There are no sounds of bustling merchants or the clinking of armor. Only the soft murmur of the wind and the distant calls of birds. The desert before you feels like a canvas, empty, but brimming with possibility. There's something peaceful about this place. The fortress was never intended to be a symbol of dominance or power, but a quiet protector standing watch over the empire's heart. As you gaze over the land, it's clear that this fortress served more than one purpose. Yes, it was a strategic defense point, but it also symbolized the empire's commitment to preserving the richness of its culture, its knowledge, and its people. Even after all these centuries, Ranghuz remains an enduring testament to the quiet strength of the Persian Empire. In a world where empires rose and fell with the brutality of war, Persia's empire carved its own path through diplomacy, trade, and an understanding that even the harshest deserts can bloom with life when you build the right foundation. As you descend the tower and head back toward the winding roads of the fortress, you pause to consider the kind of legacy this empire left behind. It's not about the grand monuments or the military triumphs. It's about the people, the ones who quietly built, cultivated, and preserved. The engineers, the gardeners, the poets, the scholars. They understood something profound. True strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's soft, silent, steady, and when it's done right, it stands the test of time. You exit the fortress grounds, the wind lifting your hair gently, and begin to walk back toward the bustling market. But as you step onto the worn path once more, you realize you'll never quite look at the Persian Empire the same way again. Not just a story of kings and battles, but of quiet resilience and the wisdom of those who built from the earth, stone by stone. As the sun begins its descent beyond the horizon, casting a golden glow over the land, the hustle and bustle of the market town you're walking toward becomes more pronounced. The sounds of merchants calling out their wares mix with the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the cobblestones. The air is thick with the scent of roasting meats, fresh-baked bread, and exotic spices. It's a far cry from the stillness of the desert, yet it holds the same energy, a pulse of life that stretches back millennia. This market, though small compared to the grand bazaars of major cities like Ctesiphon or Baghdad, has its own charm. You spot a Persian merchant, his stall brimming with vibrant silks and intricately woven carpets. His hands move deftly as he folds a rug with the same care that one might tend to an ancient manuscript. The designs on these carpets, you're told, are more than mere decoration. They are a reflection of the intricate worldviews held by the Persian people, geometric patterns, swirling vines, and symbols that represent the eternal struggle between order and chaos. But before you can get lost in the maze of textiles, something catches your eye at a nearby stall. A small wooden crate is perched atop a pile of produce, and inside the crate are the glistening pomegranates, a fruit that seems to hold the very essence of Persia within its red skin. You can't help but wonder how this fruit has come to symbolize the Persian people for centuries. Its seeds, so small yet so numerous, are like a perfect metaphor for the empire itself, individual parts working together to form something greater. As you approach the stall, you're greeted by a woman, her dark eyes sparkling with the same warmth as the sun overhead. She gestures for you to take a closer look, offering you a pomegranate for a price that's higher than you expected. But it's not about the cost. You're here for something more, a piece of the past that you can hold in your hand. She begins to tell you the history of the fruit, how it's been a symbol of life, fertility, and prosperity in Persia for thousands of years. Ancient Persian kings were known to give pomegranates as gifts to those they sought to honor. It's said that the fruit's abundance of seeds was a sign of the fertility of the land, and its rich color a reflection of the vitality of the empire itself. Even in the Zoroastrian religion, pomegranates held great significance, representing the duality of life and death, light and dark, good and evil. As you listen, you begin to see the fruit in a new light. It's more than just something to eat. It's a symbol of everything that made ancient Persia great, its creativity, its vitality, and its deep connection to the land. You can't help but wonder how many pomegranates have passed through these same streets, traded and gifted, their seeds planted in the soil of distant lands. Historians still debate whether the pomegranate was first cultivated in Persia or whether it came from further east, but one thing is certain: the fruit became intimately tied to the Persian identity. Its prominence in art, mythology, and daily life speaks to a culture that found beauty in the smallest details. Leaving the stall, you make your way deeper into the market, the sun now dipping below the horizon, casting long shadows over the goods and people around you. There's a calm, almost meditative atmosphere here. It's as if this market, this little corner of Persia, exists outside of time. It's a snapshot of a culture that has endured and evolved, adapting to the changes of the world while holding on to its roots. You pass by a street vendor selling dates, another of Persia's ancient staples. The dates here are plump and glistening, their golden skin shining in the dimming light. The merchant offers you a sample, and you accept, tasting the sweet, honeyed flesh of the fruit. For a moment, you can almost feel the hands of ancient Persians, hands like yours, sharing the same simple pleasures of life. Dates, too, have a long history in Persia. They've been cultivated here for thousands of years, thriving in the region's warm, dry climate. Like the pomegranate, dates are more than just food, they're part of the cultural fabric of Persia. Their significance runs deep, symbolizing hospitality, generosity, and abundance. But as you chew the sweet fruit, you can't help but wonder about the stories embedded in each bite. What did the traders who passed through this market long ago think of the dates they carried with them? Were they aware of the historical weight of the fruits they sold? Or were they simply doing what all markets do, exchanging goods, trading stories, and living out their own small, everyday dramas? As the evening falls, the market becomes quieter. The vendors pack up their stalls, their voices fading into the soft murmur of the night. You find a small spot to sit under the shade of a tree and take a moment to reflect on the day. The rhythm of the market, the warmth of the sun, and the taste of the pomegranate linger in your mind. This is Persia, a place where the past and present meet, where the simplest things, like a fruit or a carpet, carry the weight of centuries of culture, wisdom, and human connection. Looking around at the nightfall creeping over the marketplace, you feel a sense of connection to this ancient civilization that's so far removed from your own time. Persia may have faded into history, but its spirit lives on, embedded in the fabric of the land and its people. And as you close your eyes for a moment, you realize that perhaps, in some small way, this timeless energy lives on in you as well. The night deepens, and you find yourself walking along the dusty road toward the outskirts of the town, the soft glow of oil lamps flickering in the distance. The air, though cooler now, still carries the warmth of the desert. It's a peculiar contrast, the coolness of the evening against the lingering heat of the day, as if the land itself is trying to hold on to the last vestiges of its energy before surrendering to the night. As you continue down the path, you pass by a Persian caravanserai, a resting place for travelers that has stood for centuries. The structure, though simple in design, holds the quiet dignity of a place built to endure. Caravanserais were vital to the ancient trade routes that crisscrossed the Persian Empire, offering shelter, food, and water to traders, travelers, and their animals. The caravanserai was a place where cultures converged, merchants from the east, the west, the north, and the south, all coming together to exchange goods, stories, and knowledge. Stepping closer, you see a group of travelers gathered around a fire, their faces illuminated by the flickering flames. They are speaking in a language you don't understand, but the warmth of the fire, the rhythmic crackling of the wood, and the gentle hum of conversation create a sense of unity. It's as if the caravanserai is a living testament to the world of connections, how each individual journey is part of something far larger. This is the Silk Road, a trade route that spanned thousands of miles, connecting the cultures of China, India, Persia, and beyond. It wasn't just a road for goods, it was a road for ideas, philosophies, and inventions. The Persian Empire, with its strategic location, played a pivotal role in facilitating the exchange of goods like silk, spices, and precious metals, as well as knowledge, everything from astrology to mathematics to medicine. Historians still debate the exact origins of the Silk Road, with some claiming it began long before the rise of the Persian Empire, while others argue that Persia itself served as the bridge between East and West. What is undeniable, however, is the profound impact Persia had on the development of the route. The Persian Empire was the conduit through which goods and ideas flowed from the east to the west, and vice versa. You walk closer to the fire, the warmth reaching your skin and easing away the chill of the night air. The travelers here are likely weary, their faces etched with the exhaustion that only comes from months of travel across the vast, unforgiving desert. They speak of distant lands, and the words they use evoke images of far-off places. For a moment, it's easy to imagine that you too are part of this long journey, walking alongside them as they carry their wares, their hopes, and their dreams across this ancient, vast land. One of the travelers offers you a cup of tea, a beverage that has traveled the Silk Road in its own right. The tea leaves, he explains, come from a distant place in the east, carried by traders much like himself. The warmth of the tea, though simple, is comforting. Its flavors, earthy and rich, seem to carry the stories of the many hands that have prepared it along the way. In this moment, you understand the power of the Silk Road, not just in terms of trade, but in how it connected people from diverse cultures and backgrounds. The merchants, the traders, the scholars, the adventurers, they all shared something, a common thread that bound them together as they moved along the same paths. It wasn't just about what they traded, it was about what they shared, ideas, stories, and experiences that transcended borders and time. As you sit by the fire, sipping the tea and listening to the soft murmur of voices, you feel the pull of the ancient past. The Silk Road may have been a route for goods, but it was also a route for cultural exchange, a testament to the fact that, despite the vast distances and differences between people, there has always been a shared human connection. The same connection that you now feel as you sit beside the fire, feeling the warmth spread through you as the flames flicker and dance in the night. Historians still argue whether the Silk Road's cultural impact was greater than its economic impact, but one thing is clear: without the Persian Empire's influence, the route would not have been the same. Persia's role in connecting the East and the West was pivotal, shaping the course of history in ways that would echo through the centuries. The fire crackles once more, and you feel your eyelids grow heavy, the quiet of the desert night beginning to envelop you. You think back to the pomegranate, the dates, the carpets, the merchants, the caravanserais, all the pieces of the puzzle that form the great Persian legacy. The journey is far from over, but for now, as you lean back and close your eyes, you can feel the weight of history lifting you into a soft, peaceful rest. The desert night has settled in like a blanket, the stillness wrapping itself around the world outside the caravanserai. You, too, find yourself enveloped in this calm, as though the entire desert itself has decided to pause, to breathe in perfect harmony. You lay back, your body sinking into the warmth of your surroundings, the fire's crackle now reduced to a soft murmur in the background. It's in this stillness, this quiet moment, that you begin to drift, gently, slowly, into a story of ancient Persia that many have forgotten but which still echoes through the ages. You are now in Persian gardens, places of beauty, tranquility, and precision. Known as paradises in their own right, these gardens were meticulously designed to reflect the divine order of the universe. Picture lush greenery laid out in geometric patterns, water flowing in intricate channels, fountains singing their soft songs, and the perfume of fruit and flowers hanging heavily in the warm night air. The Persian garden wasn't just a place to relax, it was an expression of the very essence of Persian identity, a reflection of the empire's love for balance and beauty. One of the most famous of these gardens is the Boggy Fin, located in the city of Kashan. This garden, with its fountains, ponds, and luxurious flowers, has been celebrated for centuries as an embodiment of Persian horticultural genius. But beyond its beauty, there is something deeply philosophical embedded within these gardens. The Persian belief that nature, when controlled and perfected, could serve as a reflection of paradise itself. The gardens were designed with purpose. The symmetry, the arrangement of plants, the precise layout of the water channels, all were meant to evoke the four elements of life: earth, water, fire, and air. The water channels that snaked through the garden weren't just for decoration, they were symbolic. Water, in this case, represented the flow of life itself, while the pomegranate trees, the symbol of fertility and abundance, stood as guardians of prosperity. Historians still argue whether the Persians were the first to design such gardens or whether the practice spread from other ancient civilizations. Regardless, the Persian garden became a model for those that followed, influencing the design of gardens in the Islamic world and beyond. This tradition of creating serene, thoughtful spaces, where every plant, every stone, every drop of water had its place, eventually found its way into the very homes of the Persian elite, where they could bask in the tranquility of their constructed paradise. As you lay there in the quiet darkness, you can almost hear the sound of water trickling, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. It's easy to imagine a Persian noble reclining under the shade of a flowering tree, contemplating the universe, or perhaps engaging in a conversation with a visiting scholar. Those moments in the garden weren't just about luxury, they were about reflection, about creating a physical space that could bring one closer to the divine, closer to peace. A garden like this was a sanctuary, a living metaphor for the larger cosmic order. These gardens were often the sites of intellectual gatherings, where scholars, poets, and scientists would come together to exchange ideas. One of the most famous Persian figures associated with this intellectual tradition was the philosopher Avicenna, known in the West as Ibn Sina. Born in the early 11th century, Avicenna was a polymath whose work covered a vast range of topics, from medicine to philosophy to astronomy. He spent much of his life in various parts of the Persian Empire, including in gardens like the one you now find yourself imagining, surrounded by the natural beauty of Persia. In these spaces, scholars would engage in debates, discussions, and even mystical contemplation, their ideas blossoming as naturally as the gardens around them. The Persian gardens weren't just a space for beauty, they were a place for the exchange of ideas, where the intellectual pursuits of the time were nurtured like the plants themselves. This was where the wisdom of the ancient world was preserved, where the seeds of knowledge were sown, and where new ideas would sprout and take root. In the cool shade of a cypress tree, a philosopher might consider the intricacies of the universe, contemplating everything from the movements of the stars to the natural laws that governed life on Earth. These gardens, like the one you're drifting through now, were places of healing, both physically and spiritually. They were environments designed to ease the mind, to calm the soul, and to remind people of the delicate balance that exists in nature. In a world that was often harsh and unpredictable, the Persian garden offered a refuge, a chance to reconnect with the rhythms of life and nature. Historians still debate the full significance of these gardens, wondering if their cultural importance was as much spiritual as it was practical. Some believe that the gardens were a form of meditation, while others argue that they were primarily status symbols for the elite. Regardless, the impact of the Persian garden on the world, especially in terms of its design and philosophical significance, cannot be overstated. Today, their influence can be seen in gardens across the world, from the Alhambra in Spain to the Taj Mahal in India, and beyond. As you drift further into the quietude of the night, the subtle rustling of leaves, the distant sound of running water, and the soft fragrance of pomegranate blossoms fill your senses. You realize that in this space, you are not just sleeping, you are experiencing a moment in time, a moment of peace, created by the hands of the Persian people, designed to offer a sanctuary for the mind, body, and soul. It is, after all, this delicate balance, this connection to nature and to something greater, that offers you the greatest comfort of all. The world outside is now deep into the quiet of night, and as your mind begins to float further, carried by the soft breeze of ancient stories, you find yourself turning to the Persian Silk Road, a stretch of trade routes that once connected the east to the west. The bustling caravanserais, the colorful tapestries, the scent of spices, and the sound of traders haggling, they are all part of the rhythm of life in this ancient world. It's a world where goods and knowledge moved freely across vast distances, linking civilizations in ways that would shape history for centuries. Now imagine yourself stepping into one of these bustling markets. Picture the narrow cobblestone streets, lined with shops full of delicate Persian rugs, intricate ceramics, and shimmering golden jewelry. Overhead, vibrant silks flutter in the wind, their colors catching the light as travelers from the distant corners of the empire arrive. The Silk Road wasn't just about the exchange of goods, it was about the exchange of ideas, cultures, and even religion. Here, in the heart of Persia, you could find scholars from China, merchants from India, and philosophers from Greece, all sharing stories and wisdom from their far-flung lands. Among the most intriguing aspects of this trade network was the role of Persian traders, who acted as intermediaries between East and West. The Persians had perfected the art of diplomacy, balancing their relationships with different empires, and using their position to facilitate trade. Historians still argue whether the Persians were the most skilled diplomats of the ancient world, or whether it was their strategic location that made them indispensable to the Silk Road. Either way, their influence in shaping the flow of goods and ideas was undeniable. One such good was the silk itself, prized for its beauty and rarity. The secret of silk production was so closely guarded by the Chinese that for centuries, the West knew nothing of how this delicate fabric was made. But through the Persian traders, silk began to slowly make its way westward, eventually reaching Europe, where it became a symbol of wealth and status. The silk that flowed through Persia became a cherished commodity, woven into the very fabric of trade. But it wasn't just material goods that traveled along these routes. Philosophical ideas, religious teachings, and scientific knowledge also made their way from one culture to another. Persia, with its rich intellectual heritage, was a key player in this cultural exchange. Think of the Avicenna, whose writings on medicine and philosophy influenced scholars as far away as Europe, or the great Al-Khwarizmi, the Persian mathematician whose work would later shape the development of algebra. These men were not just scholars, they were ambassadors of knowledge, moving freely across the Silk Road, their ideas spreading across continents. As the night deepens and you drift further into your thoughts, you realize that the Persian Empire was not just a hub for trade, it was a melting pot of cultures, ideas, and beliefs. From the farthest corners of the East to the shores of the West, Persian merchants, philosophers, and scientists helped bridge the gap between two worlds that, at times, seemed impossibly distant from each other. In their journey, they not only brought with them valuable goods but also the gift of knowledge, the gift of the interconnectedness that defines our world even today. The Silk Road, stretching from the Mediterranean to the farthest reaches of China, was far more than a mere trade route. It was a conduit for cultural transformation. The Persians, with their strategic location and diplomatic skills, were key players in making sure this cultural exchange flourished. Their caravans, filled with luxurious goods, also carried something far more precious: the idea that the world was larger, more interconnected, and more complex than anyone had previously imagined. And now, in the quiet of the night, as the winds whisper through the ancient walls of Persia, you are caught in the ripple effect of all those centuries of trade. You are part of a great, ongoing story that connects you to people, places, and ideas from every corner of the world. The fruits of the Silk Road, both physical and intellectual, have trickled down through the ages, and you can feel them, subtle, persistent, still influencing the world today. All of this was built on the foundation laid by ancient Persians, who understood the value of both the tangible and intangible, the value of connection, and the value of knowledge. You drift further into the night, your mind wandering to a Persian caravanserai once again, imagining the travelers and traders who once passed through, leaving behind stories and ideas. Their journey was more than a physical one. It was an intellectual one, a spiritual one, carried forward by the gentle, enduring winds of the Silk Road. As your journey down the Silk Road continues, the night deepens, and the world around you quiets even more. You feel yourself gently pulled toward an unexpected corner of the ancient world, the rise of Islamic Golden Age, a period of intense intellectual and cultural growth that shaped much of the world's knowledge. In this chapter of history, Persia once again takes center stage, not just as a land of trade, but as a land of profound innovation and discovery. You find yourself standing in a bustling city under the soft glow of lantern light, Baghdad. This was no ordinary city. This was the beating heart of the Islamic world, where scholars, scientists, and philosophers gathered to create one of the most intellectual societies the world has ever known. The House of Wisdom stood at the center of it all, a grand library and academy that welcomed thinkers from across the Muslim world. There, Persian scholars led the charge in translating ancient texts, preserving and expanding upon the knowledge of Greece, India, China, and beyond. Imagine yourself entering that library where the smell of ink and parchment fills the air, and the sound of quills scratching on paper is the backdrop to hundreds of intellectual minds working feverishly. On the shelves, there are manuscripts filled with mathematics, astronomy, medicine, and philosophy, all preserved and shared by Persian scholars. You see Al-Razi, one of the greatest physicians of the time, carefully examining ancient Greek medical texts and adding his own insights on diseases like smallpox and measles. It's in this world of Persian scholarship that the foundation for modern medicine begins to take shape. But there's more. Al-Khwarizmi, another great Persian mind, is hard at work, developing the mathematical concepts that would become known as algebra. His writings on solving equations would eventually spread westward, influencing European mathematicians for centuries. You begin to realize that the very term algebra comes from the title of one of his books, Al-Kitab al-Muqtasar fi Hizb al-Jabr wal-Maqabala, which roughly translates to the compendious book on calculation by completion and balancing. And it's not just math. His work on algorithms would become the basis for modern computer science, hundreds of years before the first computer was even imagined. Beyond mathematics and medicine, the scholars of the Islamic Golden Age were also exploring astronomy. The Persian astronomer al-Battani refined earlier Greek works on the motion of the stars and planets, producing more accurate models of the universe. You picture him, gazing up at the sky with his astrolabe in hand, tracking the movements of celestial bodies with astonishing precision. His work was so advanced that it would influence astronomers in both the Islamic world and medieval Europe, centuries after his death. As you drift deeper into the story of this era, it's impossible not to be in awe of the vast intellectual achievements that emerged from this time. Yet, what's even more striking is how interconnected it all was. Scholars didn't work in isolation. They traded knowledge just as merchants traded silk. The House of Wisdom was a place where ideas were freely exchanged. Persian scholars learned from Greek philosophy, Chinese inventions, and Indian mathematics, while also contributing their own discoveries. Historians still argue whether it was the sheer cosmopolitan nature of Baghdad, drawing scholars from every corner of the world, that made it the epicenter of intellectual thought, or whether it was the patronage of the Abbasid Caliphate, eager to preserve and promote knowledge. Either way, Persia's role in this era was indispensable. As you let these thoughts wash over you, you realize that the influence of the Persian scholars didn't stop at the borders of the Islamic Empire. Their work was carried far beyond Baghdad, spreading to the courts of Spain, the Byzantine Empire, and even the Far East. The Greek texts that had been lost to the Western world for centuries were revived, translated, and expanded upon, thanks to the efforts of these Persian scholars. In many ways, their contributions laid the groundwork for the Renaissance that would later bloom in Europe. By now, the night is deep, and your journey through time has led you to one of the most profound moments in history. Persia, with its intellectual fervor and commitment to knowledge, was not just a link between East and West. It was a bridge of ideas, one that carried the knowledge of the ancients into the modern world. The scholars of the Islamic Golden Age shaped not only the course of history but also the way we understand the world today. As the wind rustles softly, your thoughts begin to quiet. You realize that what you've just witnessed is a moment in time, fleeting and yet enduring. The ripple effects of these ancient ideas, these Persian scholars, continue to shape our world in ways we may never fully grasp. And as you close your eyes, you're reminded that in the grand tapestry of history, the Persian contribution to human knowledge remains a shining thread stretching far beyond its time. As the cool night air settles around you, the wind whispers softly in your ears, carrying the story forward to an era where Persian influence continues to echo through the ages. You're no longer wandering the libraries of Baghdad or the bustling streets of ancient Persia. Instead, your mind takes you to the world of Persian gardens, where the art of landscaping was transformed into something far greater than mere beauty. These gardens, symbolic of the paradisiacal realms of ancient Persian thought, would later spread across the globe, influencing everything from Mughal architecture in India to the grand designs of Renaissance Europe. Close your eyes and picture yourself walking through one of these tranquil spaces. You hear the soft trickle of water as it flows from a fountain surrounded by symmetrical pathways, trees, and carefully cultivated flowers. The air is thick with the scent of roses and jasmine, a symphony of colors that seem almost too perfect to be real. This is not just any garden. This is a Persian paradise, a sacred space designed to embody the harmonious balance between nature and order, a place where life, water, and nature cycles are revered. The design of these gardens was far more than an aesthetic choice. It was a reflection of Persian philosophy and cosmology. Persian gardens were often divided into 4 quadrants, with the number 4 symbolizing the 4 corners of the earth, the 4 seasons, and the 4 elements. The idea was that these gardens represented a microcosm of the universe, a place where the natural world was tamed and ordered in perfect harmony. They were seen as a reflection of the Garden of Eden, where divine perfection was mirrored on earth. As you walk through the lush pathways of a Persian garden, you start to understand the deeper meaning behind these spaces. The central water channels, often designed to resemble rivers, symbolize the flow of life, a reminder that water is the source of all things. In the Islamic world, water was seen as a sacred element, a gift from the heavens. The gardens were places of spiritual reflection, where individuals could find peace and solace, contemplating both the natural world and the divine. It was here, in these serene spaces, that the line between the human and the divine blurred. Historians still argue whether Persian gardens were purely aesthetic in their design, or whether they were deeply tied to religious and philosophical beliefs about paradise and the afterlife. What is certain, however, is that their beauty and harmony would leave a profound mark on the gardens of the Mughals, Ottomans, and even later, the Renaissance. These Persian gardens would spread across continents, influencing garden design in places like Spain, where the Alhambra would later be constructed with similar principles in mind. As your mind drifts further into the world of Persian gardens, you begin to notice how their design principles were adopted by various cultures, becoming a model for future generations. The use of fountains, water channels, and flowers became a staple of gardens everywhere. Even in the modern world, the Persian influence can be seen in the botanical gardens and public parks that dot our cities, often designed to offer a small sanctuary of peace in an otherwise busy world. In this quiet, peaceful space, you feel the passage of time slow even more. You are connected not just to the land you are standing on, but to a rich history that stretches across millennia. These gardens, designed by the ancients, still serve as a reminder of the beauty that can be found when human hands and minds seek to bring order and peace to the natural world. As the night stretches on, you find yourself lost in the tranquility of the garden. You realize that Persia, with its incredible ability to blend nature with art and philosophy, gave the world something truly lasting. These gardens were more than just places of beauty, they were symbols of what humanity could create when they sought to bring divine order into the world. And just like the gardens themselves, their influence continues to bloom and grow, generation after generation, crossing borders and cultures to leave a legacy that endures to this day. The night now seems even more still as you drift forward in time, deeper into the heart of Persia's legacy. Your next destination isn't a peaceful garden or a scholarly library, but a place of innovation that would shape not only the course of Persia's history but also change the way people lived across the world. As the night draws on, you arrive at the time when the ancient Persian world was on the verge of something that would be just as revolutionary as the discovery of the wheel or writing, the development of Persian architecture. You find yourself standing before one of the great wonders of the ancient world, the Persepolis, the ceremonial capital of the Achaemenid Empire. The towering columns, intricately carved stone reliefs, and grand stairways all whisper tales of a civilization that not only understood the power of empire but also sought to impress upon their subjects a sense of awe, respect, and order. This was not just a city of governance. It was a city built to showcase the grandeur of Persia, a place where art, architecture, and power converged in magnificent harmony. You walk through the colossal gates, the stone floors cool beneath your feet, and gaze upward at the stone reliefs depicting ancient kings and their conquests. Each scene is like a frozen moment in time, capturing the strength of the Persian Empire in its prime. You can almost hear the echoes of ancient voices, the bustle of courtiers and royal messengers, as they make their way through the palace grounds, navigating its magnificent columns and courtyards. The sheer scale of it all is staggering. Persepolis was built with the belief that its beauty and grandeur would echo through history for centuries to come. But what you realize as you stand there in awe is that it wasn't just the physical size of Persepolis that made it remarkable. It was the way in which Persian architecture used space and light to convey power. Every column, every relief, every staircase was designed not just for practicality, but to evoke a sense of reverence in those who entered. Historians still argue about the exact symbolism behind the Persian column, which often stood tall, slender, and graceful, a reflection of the aesthetic and cultural ideals of the Achaemenid period. Was it an expression of Persian mastery over nature? Or was it an expression of the grace that the empire wanted to project into the future? The architecture of Persepolis was not just an imperial statement, it was a philosophical expression of what Persia was. The designs included representations of deities, kings, and nature, incorporating Persian religious and cosmological themes. You begin to understand that, much like the Persian gardens, Persian architecture aimed to embody balance, harmony, and beauty. The careful alignment of structures with natural elements, the use of light and shadow, and the strategic positioning of rooms and courtyards all served a greater purpose: to create a space where humans were in harmony with the divine, where rulers could project their power, and where visitors from around the world would leave in awe of what the empire had achieved. As you continue your exploration of Persian architectural feats, you realize that this influence extended far beyond Persepolis. The Sasanian Empire, which would rise centuries later, carried on this architectural legacy with the Tak-Kasra, a colossal palace that held the record for the largest vaulted space for centuries. The Sassanid architects were masters at creating monumental structures that stood as a testament to the grandeur of their civilization, combining Persian designs with innovations in engineering. Historians still debate whether these grand architectural marvels were meant to showcase Persia's divine right to rule or to remind the world of the empire's eternal nature. Was it the magnificence of the buildings themselves, or was it the very symbolism of power and divinity they carried that ensured Persia's influence across centuries? Perhaps it was both. Standing there, your mind drifts once again, contemplating how the architectural achievements of Persia did not just remain confined to ancient times. The legacy of Persian architecture would continue to influence the design of monumental structures in the Islamic world, in India, and even in parts of Europe. From the blue-tiled mosques of Isfahan to the Taj Mahal, the influence of Persian design principles is unmistakable. The use of symmetry, balance, and intricate craftsmanship left its mark, and these principles continue to inspire architects and builders around the world to this very day. As the cool desert wind swirls gently around you, you realize that, just like the gardens and the libraries, Persian architecture was a lasting gift to the world, one that transcends time and place. And as you step back from the ruins of Persepolis in your mind's eye, you understand that it wasn't just the grandiosity of the structures that made them special. It was the ideas behind them, ideas about power, beauty, and the divine, that continue to resonate with us today. As the night continues to unfold, you find yourself at the final step of this journey through ancient Persia, where history's most lasting impacts were not confined to grand cities or remarkable architecture, but reached deep into the everyday lives of the people who once called this empire home. Persian culture, in all its complexity, provided a rich tapestry of contributions that continue to shape the modern world. And yet, when we think of ancient Persia, we often forget the deep cultural and scientific achievements that were quietly taking root during this time, subtly influencing the course of human progress. Imagine yourself now standing before a modest Persian workshop, where the hum of daily life is alive with the rhythm of craft. A silk weaver works by candlelight, spinning delicate threads into the finest textiles, while an alchemist mixes strange powders and oils, attempting to unlock the secrets of nature. This wasn't just any workshop. This was a microcosm of innovation that existed across the empire, from the bustling markets of Ctesiphon to the quiet workshops nestled in the hills of Persia's rural landscape. Here, the pursuit of knowledge and craftsmanship was just as revered as military conquests and architectural grandeur. At the heart of this story lies the Persian devotion to science, particularly in fields like mathematics, astronomy, and medicine. Persian scholars were far ahead of their time, building upon the works of ancient civilizations like Babylonians and Greeks, while also making their own groundbreaking discoveries. One of the most significant contributions came from the field of astronomy. The Persians, under the Sassanid dynasty, constructed observatories and perfected early forms of astronomical instruments that would later be crucial for the Islamic Golden Age. Historians still argue whether the Sassanid astronomers were the true pioneers of astronomical study, or if their innovations were inherited from earlier civilizations. What we do know is that their work influenced the study of stars and planets for generations to come. In medicine, the ancient Persians are also responsible for remarkable advancements. Persian physicians, particularly those in the Persian Empire's heartland, were known for their extensive knowledge of the human body and their skill in performing complex surgeries. They even began to use anesthesia long before it became standard practice in the West. The influence of Persian scholars like Avicenna, Ibn Sina, would reach far beyond their time, with his canon of medicine becoming a foundational text in Europe during the Middle Ages. The Persian contribution to medical science is still acknowledged today, particularly in the field of pharmacology, where their herbal remedies and early forms of chemistry laid the groundwork for the future. Your mind drifts once more, and you realize that the Persian Empire, for all its grandeur and splendor, was equally shaped by the quiet work of its scientists, philosophers, and scholars. It wasn't just the mighty kings and towering cities that left their mark on history. It was the diligent work of individuals whose innovations in medicine, mathematics, and astronomy formed the foundation of future knowledge. As the hours pass and the desert sky begins to lighten, you reflect on the incredible tapestry that was Persian history, a civilization that blended art, architecture, science, and philosophy into a rich and lasting legacy. The ancient Persians may no longer walk among us, but their ideas, innovations, and creations live on, gently influencing our world today in ways we often take for granted. The night air feels even cooler now, the sound of the wind rustling through the desert sands offering a sense of peace and reflection. You realize that the Persian Empire was more than just a military power or a great empire of conquest. It was a place where knowledge was cherished, where beauty was cultivated, and where people strive to understand their place in the grand design of the universe. In this quiet moment, you come to appreciate the enduring power of their legacy, one that continues to shape the world we live in, even if we don't always realize it. Now, as the night winds down, the story of ancient Persia slowly fades into the background of your mind. You feel your body begin to relax, the weight of the journey lifting as you let go of the past and settle into the present moment. The soft hum of the world outside lulls you into a sense of calm, and as the last whispers of the Persian Empire's story drift away, you find yourself drifting deeper into the quiet peace of sleep.